Okay, guys, we're going to switch gears for a second. We've been talking a lot about the U.S. opportunity. We've had some conversation around Canada. We've had some conversation around Latin America. Now we're going to shift to the continued cannabis expansion in European markets, right? So I'm going to introduce our next panel and bring them out. So if you guys are ready, Jaime Krug from Centri, as we get them rolling. Hello, Jaime, welcome out. Everybody give Jaime a round of applause. Jaime, I'll let you introduce your panel. Great to see you. Great to see you. Right.
Have a seat. Are we? Are there supposed to be 2 people joining virtually?
Yes, we have 2 people.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to moderate our panel discussion on cannabis expansion within Europe. Let me start by introducing our panelists. We will have 2 joining virtually, who you'll see pop up on the screen here shortly. Sitting here with me today is Kyle Detweiler, CEO of Cleverleaves. Cleverleaves is a multinational cannabis company with an emphasis on ecologically sustainable, large-scale cultivation and pharmaceutical-grade processing as the cornerstones of its global cannabis business. Also joining me here is Alvaro Torres, CEO and co-founder of Khiron Life Sciences, a vertically integrated international medical cannabis leader with core operations in Latin America and Europe. Joining us on our screen here, you'll see Ronald Schneller, COO, Cansativa. Cansativa is the leading cannabis wholesaler in Germany, owning the exclusive distribution rights for domestic cannabis. Roland has mastered operational excellence and has broad experience in different markets with complex supply chains and regulatory requirements. Also joining virtually is Alexander Rabinovitch, CEO of Israel NASDAQ-listed InterCure, the leading profitable, fastest-growing cannabis company outside of North America with revenue runway of more than 70 million. And I'm Jaime Krug, partner and technical accounting practice leader at Centri. Centri is an accounting advisory firm that helps all types of businesses and companies in the cannabis space and beyond. So with that, we'll jump into our discussion. I'd like to first kick off with a focus on Germany, as they are currently leading Europe in terms of growth. Roland, how have you seen the landscape of the cannabis market in Germany evolve from when you first entered the market, noting the significant growth it's experienced the past few years?
Hey, Jamie, thank you very much for the introduction. And I think it's easiest if I'm comparing the market back in 2018. For you all guys, in 2017, medical cannabis was legalized in Germany. And I'll compare full year 2018 to the current year, 2021. And just give you the magnitude of how the market changed and what we could see there. Back in 2018, it was the first full year, we saw roughly 3 tons of medical cannabis sold. This changed to 2021 to 15 tons. So this is 5 times higher. And we're expecting to see significant growth over the next years as well. Back in 2018, being a very young market in Germany, there was a very limited supply. There have been imports from the Netherlands, Canada, and almost every patient was lucky to receive any flower, and there weren't any pushbacks or complaints regarding product quality. This changed significantly to 2021. If you look in our landscape right now, we see more than 30 suppliers, more than 100 products, and now we see that the product quality is way more important. So if there is anything slightly out of spec or not on point, we receive quality claims to say, okay, we need to improve here. And what we see as well is that besides flowers, we see significant growth on extracts and oils, that this is getting more and more important. Said that, knowing that this is a really fast-growing market, this is being able to see when we look at competitors. So back in 2018, there were 4 wholesalers specializing in medical cannabis. Right now, we're roughly at 80, so 80 different cannabis wholesalers distributing medical cannabis within Germany. For us, 2021 is a very important year because in July this year, we saw the introduction of the domestically grown cannabis. This is grown by 3 suppliers. It's by Aurora, Tilray, and Demikan. Last one is a German one. And these 3 suppliers grow the cannabis and ship it to us. And the fixed transfer price is 4.3 euro per gram. So this is significantly lower than the average transfer price we've seen until now. So we're expecting to see changes and a more competitive market right now. The domestic grown cannabis will be annually up to 2.6 tons. And as you already mentioned, this will be exclusively distributed by us. However, if you put that into perspective, 2.6 tons to currently 15 tons, it's only a small part of the market. So Germany is still dependent on many imports from countries like Canada, Netherlands, but now we see imports from almost everywhere.
Thank you. Zooming out a bit, currently Europe is purely a medicinal cannabis market. What effect do you think the road to legalization of recreational use will have on the growth of the markets we've seen so far?
I would like to start there again with Germany. This one is the leading one regards of size right now. First of all, we're expecting a continuous growth of the medical cannabis market within the next years. And based on the federal elections we had in September in Germany, we are expecting the recreational use starting within 1 to 3 years. And this will be a huge impact on the industry. I think there will be a focus shift from the medical to the recreational market for many players. And if you just look at the market size, we'll see that the market will be at least 10 times bigger. So right now, we're talking about 15 tons. The current illegal market within Germany is expected to be at roughly 200 tons, still growing. And since you asked for the European markets, I think Germany is a leading example for other EU countries. We've seen a successful implementation of the medical cannabis. We've seen the launch of the domestic growth, and we are expecting the launch of the recreational market as well. Both markets will have significantly impact on the tax income, and I think this is something that every country will be interested in. And therefore, I see Germany as a role model and an accelerator for other European countries to expand and to go into the cannabis markets. However, just a side note, we are ready for that. We just built a new strong room with capacity of multiple tons of cannabis, because I think as soon as Germany paves the way for the recreational market, I think there will be many countries following that step.
Thank you. Alex, sticking with the topic of just general market growth, last year we saw Israel overtake Germany as the largest importer of medicinal cannabis. With companies looking to expand their operations into Israel, what are some of the challenges that they're facing in doing so?
Okay, excuse me, Ronald. I think that Israel does really represent maybe the best experience in the introduction of pharmaceutical cannabis in outside North America. Like since the the implementation of GMP medical cannabis regulations about 2 years ago in Israel, the Israeli cannabis market has grown fast to become probably the biggest market outside North America with a run rate of about 40 tons at the moment. And last year, yeah, we saw Israel importing about over 15 tons compared to about 9 tons in Germany. So, yeah, I think the market does represent a huge forecast to any market that will implement pharmaceutical grade cannabis. Yeah, I would say the biggest challenges are regulations because regulations keep changing all the time. We just overcome a new regulation for importation about 9 months ago, really hardening the process to bring pharmaceutical grade cannabis with about 300 tests that need to be made on every batch. And it's becoming a much complex environment. So I would speak to regulation as being the biggest challenges.
Thank you. Yeah, and I believe there was a new government decision that was actually just passed recently with some significant ramifications on the exportation from Israel. Would you mind sharing some details of what's happening there and the anticipated impact?
Yeah, I mean, like in Germany, we have a new government. And, for the first time, cannabis reform is part of the coalition agreements. We just had a new regulation for importation, for exportation, basically easing the format. Before that, we need to export only final products on final packaging with the Hebrew and the Arabic and the English labeling, which is, of course, not the right way to export. So basically, the new regulations state that we can export now bulks. And in the future, I expect that Israel will have importation in parallel of exportation. Basically, we can import genetics and products that are still missing in the market. And because Israel is coming from a very strong ultra-medical background, we have a lot of ultra-medical products, and those products will probably be exported out of Israel to around the world.
Thank you. Alvaro, for you, another country experiencing significant growth in the cannabis sector is the UK. How has the nature of this growth compared to what we've seen in Germany and Israel?
Well, thank you. First of all, thanks for inviting us, for inviting me. So I think the UK is still in a very nascent stage. Of course, it's not Germany today, but it's like Germany 4 years ago, for those who have been working on the space. The challenge in the UK is to gain more acceptance from the doctors to prescribe it. It's a market, the way I think about it, it's in Latin America, the patients don't know they need it, and doctors don't know how to prescribe it, and that's the challenge. In UK, the patients want it, the doctors don't want to prescribe it. And I think that challenge is being met all the time by the ability of the companies to educate more doctors. The program that was set up 2021 is allowing to expand the doctor's understanding of medical cannabis. But still very small part of the patients are getting to this program. But what you see in the Reddits, you see in the Facebooks, you see in the patient chats, everybody's looking for doctors to open up and be able to prescribe it. And there's a lot of fear from these doctors to not fall into liability problems prescribing medical cannabis. The good part of all of that is that as more doctors are prescribing, which is happening and faster, is becoming a very interesting market because, of course, the purchasing power of a UK patient, it's 150, 180 pounds a month, at least. And so when you look at Germany, you see some of those same considerations that happened 4 or 5 years ago, and that's happening today in the UK. I think it's just going to be a matter of time education, research, opening up the market, having more cannabis clinics that will educate those doctors because the patients are certainly asking for it. So, when you think about that, it's exciting because you can be in a market like Florida or Germany today. That's going to grow probably as fast, or it's going to be in 4 years as big as those markets on its own. But the challenge is, like any global challenge, it's all about education and making sure doctors know that this is not a fad, that cannabis is not a trend, that is here to help, that it helps patients. And the more we can continue to do that as an industry, the UK will be the next market, I think, in Germany, in Europe, sorry, after Germany. So I think the growth potential is huge if we're able to capture that, the doctors' attentions. But the evidence is being built every day. So I'm very optimistic about it because I see the growth and the sellout of units and grams every single day. And so, it's very exciting market. Just gotta give it a little time. But, like in Germany, whoever's being able to move there first is going to probably maintain somewhat an advantage in the next 4 years.
Thank you. Kyle, as your company's expanded into Germany and Portugal, from a supplier's perspective, what are some of the pain points you're hearing your clients experience, and how are you supporting them in their expansion efforts?
Sure. Well, just to make sure everybody in the audience understands what we're dealing with, right? The German pharmaceutical market for cannabis is very different than the US experience, right? Physician prescribed. You have to go through a lot of other medications other than cannabis before you can be eligible for a cannabis prescription. It's then given to you at a pharmacy, which is maybe going to send a message about what things could look like in the United States someday. And because of that, you have to abide by all of the same pharmaceutical manufacturing requirements that all the large pharma manufacturers abide by, including the famous EU GMP certification. And so, if you're a company that wants to develop a product or develop a brand or, focus on a specific area in Germany, you might have to do years worth of work building greenhouses and laboratories to extract or process or package. It can take a lot of time. Now, 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't a Cansativa, there wasn't really a Cleverleaves. And so now we're starting to change that. The industry is starting to have B2B producers like us that kind of take care of that biomass or input product. And hopefully that will allow a lot of companies access to a market which is otherwise much more difficult. As Roland also mentioned, price competition is also going to start in Germany soon. And producing cannabis in 10-foot thick concrete bunkers can only be done so cheap. We also want to lower the cost of access to healthcare for these patients. So, a company like Cleverleaves is kind of betting its business model on being able to lower that cost. So, we'll bring down the cost for the whole system. That's good for patients. It's good for our downstream partners. And hopefully we'll create an interesting business for Cleverleaves as well.
Thank you. And as we're talking about expansion, with that also comes supply chain issues. So Alvaro, as companies are looking to expand into new markets, what are you seeing as some of the challenges companies are facing when it comes to managing the demand of their supply chain?
Well, I think, as Kyle is pointing out, quality is of utmost importance in Europe, particularly in Germany. And by quality, I mean not only the EU GMP and things which are important, but consistency. If a doctor writes a 20% THC prescription, you better give that patient a 20% THC prescription. The quality levels in Germany and Europe are so much higher than Canada and the United States that what you're finding is that, yes, there's a lot of companies growing, attempting or starting to grow in Europe, but they need to reach the quality levels so that that product can be supplied. I think the European market, particularly, in my case, our company focuses on the downstream part of it. We focus on capturing patients, educating doctors, and getting that demand. It's hard to do both things at once because the quality, as Kyle knows, the quality focus on your grow and your extraction and your process and your products is an entire company on its own. And what we found, that we have great partners and we're always looking for more partners, is that it's not as easy as people think to be able to grow quality product or to have quality product that can be then given to the patient. Because if you sell the patient a product that's not in the spec of the doctor's prescription, you may be at risk of losing that patient and losing that doctor. And so it's not something that you see that everybody talks about it, but I think quality and supply chain strategies have to be, you have to find the right partners. It takes time, but it's also about the right quality. And then you're gonna have to start thinking about the strains, selection, the type of product, and you're gonna have to start working with your partners so that you can have an ability to mobilize new products more quickly. And that's not a challenge that you have, I would say, in not many other regions, because of the stringent quality restrictions of the European market, which also creates then a business environment where, those that types of strategies can be very successful. But it all has to come from a good supplier, a good partner that can produce what you need and that can be very agile. Because in Germany, the consumer now is becoming a lot more aware of the strains. Today, it's Hindukush or Gorilla Glue. A year from now could be something else. So you need to be able to adjust to that. And if you're able to do that, and you're able to service that demand, then you're going to be successful. But certainly supply chain is complex. And coming from Latin America, it sounds exciting that we can do this from, let's say, Colombia, where Kyle's also located. But I think it's also important that not everybody can deliver that finished product as it requires. So it's going to take some time, and it's not going to be for everybody. And there's going to be companies that are going to do that very well. And there's going to be other companies that are going to do the demand creation, all that very well. So it's hard. I think it's hard to do both. And in our case, we've made the choice to be, let's call it, production agnostic. We have partners that do this with us in partnership, and that's helped to fuel the growth that we're having in Germany, particularly in the UK.
Makes sense. Thank you. Alex, same question to you. I mean, how have you seen this issue impact the Israeli markets?
So yeah, I agree. The complexity of the supply chain in the pharmaceutical grade cannabis is enormous, and biggest challenges at the upstream is, of course, scaling up high quality production, and the way we solve it is by partnering. We partnered with some of the leading companies, Khiron, Organigram, and Charlotte Web. And this really helps basically build like a very solid supply through a fast-growing market. On the downstream, major challenges are again, scaling up logistics. We are part of the pharmaceutical world, and turning up a market from a couple of tons to tens of tons means you have to build logistics power, and yeah, we are dealing with it on an every day. So yeah, I agree that that consistency is an issue, but once you overcome that, you need to scale up, and scaling up is a big challenge.
Thank you. Roland, would you mind elaborating on some of the challenges surrounding supply chain interruptions specifically, and what could potentially cause a disruption in the availability of cannabis?
Yes, of course. So first of all, thanks Alvaro, Alex, and Kyle, because you pointed out all of the issues we have looking at our supply chain, and I would like to elaborate what are the most painful ones. So one of the really typical ones that hits us at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, are the INCP volume restrictions. So there are volume restrictions per year and country of how much cannabis can be imported. And these volumes are based on forecasts for each year. And as we've seen the last years, every year this forecast was too low. We hit the volumes earlier than expected. Until then, until there are more negotiations and these volumes are adjusted, no imports are possible. And this leads to huge issues of the supply chain, because during that time, we don't have any product coming into Germany. And since we have our domestic cannabis started in July this year, we didn't have any alternatives before. So that was a huge thing. A second thing we see is that, as Carl pointed out already, many suppliers moving out production sites from overseas to the EU to be able to be more cost competitive and faster in supplying products. However, we see that when moving the production, even being indoor greenhouses, it's not that easy. So even suppliers that are have a lot of experience struggle when they try to move a production site into the European Union, try to grow the same strain as before, because sometimes it just acts differently. And then, as we heard already, we have really tight pharma regulations. And for example, as Alvaro pointed out already, if there's a 20% THC flower prescribed, there's only a 10% window where this product can be into. So it's between 18% and 22% of THC. So this is kind of okayish for products that have a high THC value to reach the point somewhere within the 10% window. However, if we talk about the balanced products with roughly 8% THC and 8% CBD, we're talking about values around 0.8% that needs to be hit. And there we see a lot of different issues. And that's the case that we have on this specific product category. So the balanced flowers, really shortcomings of all suppliers at some point. So even with a lot of experience, so more than 5 years, there still are some points where we just see, okay, this product is not available for the next 6 months, because as soon as you see, okay, your current way is not feasible, you have to try a new one, wait for 3 months and see whether they're in spec or out of spec. And if you miss again, 6 months. And this is something that is kind of tough for us. What we try to do is, since we have a huge product portfolio, we tend to inform the prescribers and say, okay, we have a lack of supply on this product. These are product alternatives that are somehow comparable, but the thing in Germany is you cannot substitute it. So as soon as you have comparable strain and a comparable THC and CBD content, a doctor is not allowed to substitute it. So he has to get a new prescription for that. And the pharmacist isn't allowed either. So this is something where we see huge issues regarding supply chain.
Thank you. Kyle, as a supplier, how are you working with your customers to assist with some of these pain points everyone talked about here with supply chain?
I guess we grow it and we extract it. Yeah, I think, our whole business model is to take, we were all talking about quality standards, bud sizes, the smell, the packaging, all of those things matter, of course, but at the base of it has to come the core production. And there are just few places in the world that have gained these GMP certifications. So we kind of, our clients get that for free in a sense. So that's probably one of the biggest advantages. But, another thing that we're finding is most of the clientele or most of the market development in Germany so far has been dominated by cannabis companies. And one of the things that we're capable of creating is a broader universe of participants in the cannabis industry. And so one of the things that we did is we partnered up with a specialty pharma company in Europe called Ethypharm. It's a private equity-backed organization. And, Ethypharm specializes in downstream demand generation, educating physicians, marketing appropriately in Germany. Germany is not a country where you can show the, Viagra commercial on TV with a couple in the hot tub on the mountainside. It's prohibited in the country of Germany, right? There are different quirks for how you market pharmaceuticals in Germany, and so that's their expertise. Ours is production, and so that's a great marriage, if you will.
Thank you. And before we open it up for questions, I'd like to just go around to each of the panelists here for parting remarks. Alvaro, start with you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think Europe is a fantastic opportunity. It's still very early stages, but you see countries like Germany, and you cannot help but be excited because that's going to permeate across the rest of the countries. Of course, we're talking about many different countries, but just like in the US, it's 50 different countries when it comes to cannabis or recreational. You can think about Germany, UK, France will come up online, Spain, and all of these markets have tremendous purchasing power, tremendous need for cannabis, a good prevalence of use anyways. And of course, it's going to be there for a long time. And I think of Europe today as Florida was 4 years ago. Who wouldn't want to be in Florida 4 years ago? So.
Thank you. Kyle, any parting remarks?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Alvaro said it best. 2015, 2017 felt like the years to be a Canadian licensed producer. 2018 to 2021 felt like it's a great time to be a US producer. Hopefully 2022 forward will be the good time to be a European producer. There are fewer companies capable of doing it. Like Alvaro mentioned, I think Germany is a test case for the rest of Europe. 50% of pharmaceutical launches in Europe over the last 20 years first happened in Germany. So clinicians around Europe respect Germany. There'll be recreational opportunities. Already the Netherlands is beginning, it's an experiment. Switzerland is starting. And probably just the last, thinking with a little bit of a crystal ball, maybe some of what some of the European countries are doing is going to be replicated in the United States. There's still this assumption that cannabis in the United States will be treated like a recreational product, but we live underneath a presidency which has not, fully embraced that model. But, we now have the DEA awarding licenses to different groups. We, as a Colombian and Portuguese-based producer, have sold THC into the United States for the first time. So if that model transports to the United States, you might actually see the European trends that we're talking about become American concepts that are talked about in the next year or two. So might be a little out there, but it's a possibility too.
Thank you. Roland, I'll turn it over to you. Any parting remarks?
Yes, thank you. So I think right now we're in a really interesting time here in Europe, seeing a young market develop so fast and so rapidly. And I think 2 points are really important. First of all, as we heard already, being a first mover is very important to have success in such a market. But the second one is, I think it's important to have strong partnerships with other companies to be able to be successful, because I think the approach with a fully integrated company won't work out, matching all these requirements we talked about today. So I think it's important that we have parts of the value chain that are they are partners who are specialized in growing cannabis, extracting it, and later on selling it. And I think this will be the business case that will be most likely successful in Europe. And as already mentioned, I think many things we can see in regards to quality can have an effect on the global market as well.
Thank you. Alex, we'll wrap up with you here. Do you have any parting remarks before we open it up for questions?
So, I agree with the panel. I think we are heading towards exciting years in the European and of course the international market. We expect more than 40 countries joining this medical cannabis wave. And looking forward, I think we will see some market develop also into recreational. I agree with Kyle, this would be probably with the same regulation as in the States. But looking at the far future, I think once cannabis will be federally legal, the FDA will have to regulate medical cannabis, and I think this is where at the moment markets like Europe does represent the future of the medical cannabis in the States, because I can't see a way that the FDA will not put on regulation on medical cannabis, and because we are working on under federal regulation, I believe that that the FDA eventually will adopt a similar regulation as our GMP regulation.
Thank you. So at this point, I'll open up the floor to questions for our panelists.
Does anyone have a question? Oh, this mic is always hotter than I think it's going to be. Any questions for our panel today? Okay, well, I have one. When it comes to the European markets, obviously we're seeing, everything you guys just talked about. We're seeing, especially in Germany, a lot of momentum. What do you think the single biggest catalyst could be for opening up more business for each of you, more opportunity for each of you, whether it's in one market specifically, like let's take the Netherlands, for instance, or in markets that you're in, right? Is there one opportunity that you see being a major catalyst for you? Anybody who wants to dive in?
Well, I guess I could start.
Please.
For us, really, in the UK, the NHS opening up for real and being able to provide guidance to the doctors and starting providing healthcare coverage would make the UK market much bigger than Germany. As you say, it's a catalyst. We gotta wait, we gotta work, we gotta convince, we gotta educate. But certainly, from a point of view of the health perspective, is much better than opioids. From perspective of cost, is much cheaper than opioids. But when the NHS starts to, that's the National Health Services in the UK, sorry, when they actually say, we are gonna allow this, we're gonna cover this, doctors, don't worry about it, that's gonna create a big boom in the market, because in the UK, you can only import a specific amount of product based on how many prescriptions there are. So if there's no doctors prescribing, you cannot import all that much. And that's all because of the fear. So we're looking forward to the NHS and getting those 2021 results and opening up and then be able to provide insurance coverage, which also will protect the medical industry a little bit from the recreational if it ever happens.
Great. Kyle?
A couple more just to throw in. One, Germany just added selections, so that's kind of the past-looking catalyst. I still think people underappreciate how important that is. Second, a little bit more unique to the German market, if the way cannabis was prescribed shifted from a product or prescription of last resort to a prescription of first resort, I think that would create a massive change in the demand profile. And then one more would be U.S. legalization. U.S. legalizing will give countries more confidence in Europe to move forward. So I think they'll move at their own pace, but if a Biden presidency or the next presidency created that event, I think you would also see it ripple faster in Europe. The whole world's connected at this point in some ways.
Kyle, what has to happen for it to become a prescription of first resort rather than last resort? Is that educating the doctors? Is that at a higher level?
Yeah, I think Roland might be able to speak closer to this, but my assumption is it would be the BfArM, the German health regulator, that would have to make that change.
I think it's two things. Thanks, Kyle. You're completely right. I think to go that way, I think you need to convince doctors that this is really an alternative. And German doctors always rely on clinic trials. And I think this is something that we need to see the next years, to see evidence that cannabis is helping patients and improves their health constitution. As soon as we see that, I think there might be a change in the regulatories. I think the step of Germany having domestic medical cannabis program is the right step, because you wouldn't do that if you don't think that this is the right way to do. So I think we're on the right way, but I think now we need evidence, and as soon as we have evidence, I think the stigma might be more decreased, and I think then we can see a really significantly growing market here. This is in the medical market, but recreational one, as Kyle pointed out, we had our election in September. We received news this morning that the three parties that are most likely to to be the government for the next 4 years, agreed on legalizing cannabis here in Germany for recreational use. So I think this has huge impact for us, and I think it's just a matter of time now.
And Alex, anything from you?
Yeah, I agree. Again, looking at the Israeli market, which is a bit more developed, oncology patient, just for example, does get medical cannabis as first line of treatment. Of course, not for treating the cancer, but for symptoms. But again, it took us many years together. Israel is basically the heart of research of cannabis, and medical cannabis is being served even in hospitals. So I think that the future of the medical cannabis in Germany looks promising. I think that in a couple of years, sure, regulations and doctors and regulators will understand basically that there is a very good safety profile in the product. This is happening in Israel. And of course, the efficacy is much better than all alternatives. So, and again, I have to say that the real promising future for the industry is of course federal legalization, and of course regulators like the FDA understanding the benefits and the values of pharmaceutical grade cannabis.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Jaime, any parting words for our audience here?
No, I appreciate everyone's time and the engaging conversation. By nature, this is an evolving topic, so certainly can't wait to see what the future holds for cannabis in Europe.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. Let's give our panel a round of applause, please. Thank you very much, you guys.